Everybody has questions how the Cleveland Browns' newly put together quarterback room will shake out in the 2025 season. I'm going to do my best to try to walk everybody through it, try to do a little forecasting here. Browns 3D on the OBR starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Your daily delivery of all things dog pound. Browns 3D on the OBR is brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Want a big shout out, obviously, to State Sharpening. It's been a great relationship here over the last 4 months. We truly, truly appreciate them for coming on as a sponsor here for the off season, all the way up and through the draft. Again, if you were in the Cleveland area over in Broadview Heights, you need anything lawn equipment wise, you really need to go check in with the Kane family at State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Um, as always, we appreciate everybody coming out for written content every day. Of course, the OBR streaming network every night. I am here 6 o'clock. You will have Barry McBride, Fred Greetham on up at 7 o'clock. Those guys will take you through their thoughts on the draft, some things that have gone on here the last couple of days. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube, and of course, make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. A couple things we did not get to yesterday when we sat down with Mike Renner. And if you haven't checked that out, go ahead, fire up YouTube, check it out. It was a great talk with Mike Renner. And as far as Dillon Gabriel, Mike was one of the more, positive guys, of the Dillon Gabriel play, which led finally for the Browns selecting him at number 94th overall in the third round. Browns had Diontae Johnson in on Monday for a workout. Everybody kind of lost their mind over it. And I guess the Browns saw the reaction on social media and then said, you know what, go ahead, sign him anyway. Certainly Deontay Johnson, has not done himself any favors basically over the last 2 years. Grew, upset within his role in the offense with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Certainly had his issues there, of course. As Pickens started to emerge, the quarterback play wasn't so great. They were kind of in a tough situation. Johnson just, and there's right ways to go about this stuff and there's wrong ways to go about this stuff. And Deontay Johnson absolutely went about it the wrong way. There's no way around that. Carolina last year, then Baltimore, then gets cut from Baltimore, goes back to Houston. Baltimore just kind of signed him back to what it would be like. Look, you can't even be on our roster. Like the way they signed him back, it wasn't going to work that he was going to be able to go back on the roster. Just stop the Deontay Johnson madness. It started off okay with Carolina, then just I, I don't know if he was in the way of younger players or if Deontay once again could not control himself. Because Carolina went on to actually be a feisty team as the season kind of ended last year. So maybe it would have been a home where it would have worked for Deontay Johnson. For the Browns, I'm okay with this move. I'm not going to lie. I mean, we're talking about a late April move. We don't know exactly what the contract looks like right now, but I can guarantee you that there's probably little to zero guaranteed money within this deal. There was a time where Deontay Johnson had some talent, still only 29 years old. That does make you maybe a little bit nervous, I would say, because, the Browns last year with Amari Cooper inching towards that age 30 is when the Browns kind of had their issues with Amari. Of course, completely different type of contract, completely different type of money involved. And the Browns' desperation level at the wide receiver right now is probably pretty high. When you didn't, when you made the move to trade down out of two, which you were giving up on, your chance to draft Hunter, that's what it puts you in a position, where you were most likely going to be light on wide receivers. This class didn't offer a lot, and the Browns had highly looked to be linked to the top wide receiver in the class. Then, obviously pulled out of that, got Jacksonville to match the asking price that they were looking for, which then created certainly the hole at the wide receiver position. Johnson's got talent, and this is what I call, and I've done the show. We've done shows with Pete forever, and this is a guy. I basically call a two guy. He could be here for 2 days. He could be here for 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 seasons. It's all going to come down to Deontay Johnson. Does Deontay Johnson basically want to toe the line because this team does not need distractions. This team does not need malcontents. And I understand for those of you who don't like the move from that standpoint, because that certainly seems what a strong indication of what the 2025 draft class was all about, was not bringing in malcontents, was not letting talent trump personality. So if Johnson can, again, toe the line, keep himself in check, there is probably a useful spot for him here within this wide receiver unit. You figure ideally the plan for the Browns is to have Cedric Tillman start. Johnson would then get opportunities as a third wide receiver. He can play outside. He can play inside. We know what Judy's going to give this team. It's a shot in the dark. It's a lightning rod pick. It's a lottery ticket. Yeah, this is all things that you're looking at here. Could end up that Diontae Johnson never even makes it to training camp. Could ends up that, Diontae Johnson finds a way to be a nice role player for the Browns in 2025. Again, it's all going to be on Deontay Johnson. The Elijah Moore thing. And it actually happened twice in like 12 hours, which was kind of ironic because this is something never happens. So basically, the way it works is Elijah Moore knows basically what his floor in his contract is. And I think it's $3.48 million. If the number's inaccurate, I apologize. But he knows that he can come back to the Cleveland Browns on that dollar amount. So as he is working and trying to meet with other teams, work out the parameters of a contract, he knows what the floor is. Do I think any NFL team is going to offer Elijah Moore probably more than that guaranteed for the 2025 season? My guess is probably no. So there could be a real good chance Elijah Moore does come back to this team. If he does not, the Browns certainly would be eligible for compensatory pick. But I think by the lack of activity in the draft at the wide receiver position, the Browns kind of pounced quickly on Monday, signing veteran Diontae Johnson and working this out with Elijah Moore, where basically, the Browns would have to be outbid for Elijah Moore to go somewhere else. And why I think that's going to work out for the Browns is if Elijah Moore was going to get that type of money, I truly and firmly believe Elijah Moore would have gotten that money already. We're at the way, way, way bottom of free agency here. There's no big money essentially being handed out now. So it could be where Moore comes, you have Johnson, Moore comes back, you have Johnson. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying it's a great wide receiver room. I'm saying it's not scaring the death out of anybody, but it makes you feel a whole lot better about the wide receiver room than certainly you did probably a week, 10 days ago. We're going to continue on here. Topic of the day is we're going to try to figure out the way this quarterback room is going to shake out, and we will do just that. Everybody stick around. Browns 3D on the OBR. Again, it has been a great run the past few months. We are really, really thankful to the State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service family in Broadview Heights. If you are local to the Cleveland area, they're your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns, not cutting your grass. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Toro, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you're looking for a new, dependable time cutter zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. They are veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders. They are lifetime Brown fans and proud supporters of all of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. Obviously, right now, the biggest topic conversation Cleveland Browns wise, it's not about the number one pick. It's not about either the second round picks. It's not about the first, third round pick. It's not even about really the second, third round pick. It's certainly around the fifth round pick. And then, of course, Dylan Gabriel gets mentioned as well. This Cleveland Browns quarterback room has been completely completely gutted and redone from top to bottom. Deshaun Watson's still in the picture, but won't be playing at all in 2025 with an Achilles injury and certainly a whole bunch of other reasons that I'm sure you can all figure out for yourselves. Jameis Winston, it was a nice little song and dance for a little bit, but Jameis Winston has now taken his act and his talents to New York, where he is now in a weird situation where he's going to compete with Russell Wilson and certainly compete with rookie Jackson Dart. Make no mistake about it, Russ Wilson and Jameis Winston, part of the appeal for them being in New York with the New York Giants is probably after football life activities. Jameis crushed it down at the Super Bowl. Everybody fell in love with his personality and really got the opportunity to see what he can be in the industry once he finally decides to trade in his helmet. Russ, he has a wife who is in the music business. Russ certainly has aspirations after the league himself. Another reason that he considered going there as well. Brown's first move was Kenny Pickett, certainly. The trade involving the Eagles moved on from DTR, sent over a draft pick, took a draft pick back. The Kenny Pickett acquisition, and look, they could think nice things about Kenny Pickett. But my honest belief right now is they did not give Joe Flacco guaranteed money. And again, both of them have money. But you're not going to want to be in this situation where you're going to try and trade Joe Flacco. Joe basically came here because he was familiar with everybody here in Berea, wanted to come here. Now, Pickett, it's different. Now, Pickett, who for a guy who had every opportunity looked like he could compete for this job 1 month ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, all of a sudden now, for me, I kind of think Kenny might be the odd guy out. There is no future here. Certainly, the Browns did not pick up his fifth-year option. With Joe coming in, Joe already has a head start on Kenny Pickett. Knows the system, not entirely. I'm sure there's tweaks that Reese is going to bring as well, coming into this as for first-time offense coordinator. Again, Joe not familiar with all the talent, didn't play with Jerry Jeudy. Certainly didn't spend a lot of time with these two rookie running backs who should be a focal point of this offense. Cedric Tillman wasn't a major thing like he will. Wasn't a major thing. 3-game run, I should say, in 2024. But Cedric was not really a big part of anything in 2023. Elijah Moore was, if that comes back, certainly. So Kenny's coming in here and it's brand new and it's all raw. And, for the Browns, who probably, between OTAs, between training camp, between preseason games, are probably going to try to find a way to give all four of these guys a puncher's chance. 25%. There might be days where somebody gets more attention as opposed to others. That you might rest Joe Flacco a little bit because, Joe doesn't need to be airing it out in all of, in 8 days in July and most of August. So, for Kenny, I just think it's a tough spot here. And for Kenny, probably come in, play to the best of your abilities, try to look as good as you possibly can. The Browns have been synonymous for making quarterback trades over the last few years, and certainly well within the summer and moving on quarterbacks. For Kenny Pickett, I think his best option for 2025 is probably not going to be in Cleveland. And maybe the best case scenario for Kenny Pickett in 2025 is as the summer goes on, having, one team unfortunately suffer maybe a quarterback injury. And look, he's 15-11 in the league. You can't deny that. He's got some pretty decent mobility. He's going to work his tail off. Everything about Kenny Pickett, is positives. Unfortunately, sometimes the play just didn't always give you what you felt you were expecting from a guy who was a former number 1 round pick. Now, if you asked me who was going to start week 1 for the Cleveland Browns, and you asked me who was going to start the most games for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, I'd probably say the answers are different and it's not the same player. And I've talked about this before. Every NFL team goes into September, into week 1, with the possibility of, hey, maybe we can compete. A couple things go our way. All of a sudden, we're sitting here 4-2, 6-3. And then all of a sudden, you got a navigate one second half of a season, and who knows, maybe at the end, you're last man standing and you actually have a wild card berth. Joe Flacco gives you the best chance. And of course, a lot of this probably has to do with the schedule. And we won't get that, I think, till May 14th. A lot of this has to do with the schedule and, the way these games fall. Normally, always, there are certainly, division games early. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly in that way. But, you're going to put Joe Flacco out there most likely week one. You're hoping your O line, is intact talent wise. They play more like they did in 2023 than certainly they did in 2024. Although in 23, we're starting to see some signs of some warts. You can have Judy on the field, certainly Cedric Tillman, certainly David Njoku, the two rookie running backs. The Nick Chubb thing, I got to be honest, I just don't know, guys. And I don't know. I think we're further away now than maybe we originally were because I think in order to bring Nick back, it means you're kind of going to maybe do Jerome Ford dirty. Because now that Jerome Ford has that bump to $3.4 million, and maybe the Browns don't feel that he's worth it, although he kind of did show it the last 2 years with his statistical production. If you're going to move on from Jerome Ford because he earned more money, I don't know. It just feels like you're basically doing a guy dirty. And, to do that, to accommodate for Nick Chubb, I mean, I understand and I know what Nick means to this franchise. But, while Nick was not available much at all over the last 2 years, there was one guy who was in there and was pretty constant at the running back position over the last 2 seasons and contributing. And that certainly was Jerome Ford. Now, so you hope to start the season with Joe. And, you're hoping you get exactly what happened when Joe, you know, walked into Cleveland 10 days later, walked into the starting gig for the Cleveland Browns and, basically was tossing pills everywhere, making plays. And the Browns went on a lovely, lovely, crazy, and magical run to close out the 2023 season, getting themselves into the playoffs. You think Joe can do that for you? A lot of variables, of course, though. Offensive line. How does the running game look in 2025? Certainly the defensive side of the ball. Do you get contributions in the receiving game outside of Jerry Jeudy, outside of David Njoku, outside of Cedric Tillman? This team desperately needs some other guys to step up, no question. But Joe does give you the ability to start the season hot. And then all of a sudden, you don't necessarily know, you know, how you plan it. Nobody's going to be 4-2 or 5-1 and just say, all right, we'll take Joe out now and we'll go to whatever rookie we think is ready now. They wouldn't do that. Why would they? You know what I'm saying? Winning cures a lot of things. So Joe can give you, the best opportunity at a hot start. If it doesn't go as a hot start, that's when all of this probably starts to get really, really interesting for the Cleveland Browns. You have two guys, Dylan Gabriel, certainly 24, drafted in the third round, Shedeur Sanders, 23, drafted in the fifth round. It's not like the path is that either one of these guys should have to sit very long. Dylan Gabriel has played 6 years of college football. Kevin Stefanski basically fell in love with him during the draft process. Maybe it was the maturity. Maybe it was the fact that, Dylan is a little bit older and carries himself as such. It was easier to, see, the professionalism, that would work for Dylan Gabriel in Cleveland. That's part of what happens when you go to three different programs. You got to work really hard to ingratiate yourself with all the entire staff and obviously all your new teammates. Dylan's got a decent arm. He's got I would say he's probably got a plus arm. I don't know if many want to hear it, but the fact of the matter is he probably has a stronger arm than Shedeur Sanders. Doesn't necessarily matter as to which one could be the better quarterback within the league, but for a talking point, I would say, yeah, Dylan Gabriel's probably got a little bit of a stronger arm. I think Dylan Gabriel, due to the fact that he's 24, due to the fact that he's played in so many programs in college, and anybody wants to say that's maybe a negative on Dylan Gabriel, I'd say that's fair. Because you moved around a lot. I mean, you just shouldn't necessarily get rewarded for it, so to speak. But I think that's what makes him probably pretty appealing Is the age, is the maturity, is the fact that he has gone through newness so many times. Transitioning into the NFL, yes, there is a transition that is pretty big, but going from UCF to Oklahoma to Oregon, he's already made those types of jumps. This would just be the next and final jump. He, I think, would fit the system well. I think he is a guy that will stay in the pocket. He will not go looking to freelance. And I'm not putting this on anybody because the mobility is not there necessarily for any of these guys. So it's not like, we're talking about any of these guys. Say it was a Jalen Milroe where it would be a different type of ball that would be played. He stays within the pocket. He goes through his read projection. He will run if he has to. I don't have to tell you, Ohio State fans, look, second game didn't go so well. But the first game, Dylan Gabriel hung 300, ran for a score, threw for two more, I do believe, in that game. So certainly, you know, there's appeal there with, Dylan Gabriel. And I think the Browns certainly want to give him an opportunity. But they also have two guys now, Shedeur Sanders being one as well. Um, it does make for an interesting dynamic to have two guys that are basically drafted as later as they were on basically the same amount of years with the team and trying to choose between the two of them. And when the fact of the matter is the choice may only be as long as a year anyway, with those two first round picks in 2026 just staring you in the face, and a class that could certainly carry more depth at the quarterback position than this past weekend's draft did. Gabriel is going to be a pros pro. Everything that you think is a positive are all translatable traits within the NFL. The decision making, the accuracy, the read progression, the maturation, the intelligence, all of these things that you would expect when you say you drafted a quarterback who was 24 years old. Certainly does not hurt, in my opinion, that the Browns drafted him first. Certainly, there were times and there were conversations within this 2025 NFL draft where, they talked the quarterback position as far as the selection, and they got to 94. And I'm sure the conversation had to be had, we really like Dylan Gabriel here. And I'm sure there was a faction in the room saying, what about Shedeur? But they did make that ultimate decision. So this is out there. They took Dylan Gabriel and they took him 50 slots higher, 94, 144. Other than saying 50 slots higher, I don't think there's that tremendous amount of difference, honestly, from where both players were drafted. But the Browns, gun to head, did choose Dylan Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders. Certainly, I would think Gabriel's got just as good an opportunity as I do think Shedeur Sanders would as well. I've talked about this at length. I think a lot of the negatives, and certainly there are some. His arm is not top level. He's not much of an athlete whatsoever. But Shedeur Sanders did throw well in college, did show great accuracy, on deep balls. As much as I blame him, for the lack of rushing yards, and it was a big sign that he does not have the athleticism. He was trying. Will improved offensive line play, and I'll be honest, any offensive line in the world would probably be a better situation than what Shedeur was playing with in Colorado. Again, some of that, was his own doing by trying to do things, in the pocket behind the line of scrimmage that he's just not athletically capable of doing. He comes in here, and I think the chip that Shedeur is going to carry is going to be tremendously large. And I'd say it's fair. I mean, he'll never give his true side of it. He's not going to go against the family. But we don't know how he feels now about all the decisions that were made, how they chose to handle his draft process. We don't know the answers to those questions. My guess is, not everything maybe went to how Shedeur would have chosen to do it if he were able to make those decisions for himself. You kind of hate it for the kid. You do. You feel like he was put in a tough spot. But again, You're not going to turn your back on your NFL father, who was probably, and I do believe, only trying to do right by Shedeur. And, I do put a lot of weight to this, and now others have confirmed it, and you guys heard me talk about this. I think the whole Sanders draft process was difficult because I don't think anybody was really putting their true thoughts out into the world. And it's probably partly because of what Peter Schrager said, that Dion has so many friends within the league, within obviously the media business, which he was a huge, huge part of for a long time, that there were people who did not want to say something negative about his son from a friend standpoint, from a professional standpoint. But all of that is water under the bridge. Shedeur Sanders is now a Cleveland Brown quarterback. He is going into this camp, four guys: Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, himself, and Dylan Gabriel. And there is a legit opportunity for any one of these four gentlemen to A, start, B, start the most games. Again, I mentioned earlier, I think Pickett's going to end up being the odd guy out. I don't think you're going to trade Joe unless Joe asks you to move on because he sees the way it is. And hey, these guys are closer. They're ready to go. If I'm going to play this season, if there's an opportunity for me to physically play, then maybe Joe goes on. But you could flip Pickett for a day 3 pick again, just like the trade that involved him in the first time to get him here. But, Shedeur, and I said many a times, and if you would ask me in the fall, I was extremely high. I was. But then the more you watched, and then the deeper in which you watched, you started to see some things that really made you nervous as far as, translating to the NFL. Again, it was the lack of athleticism. It was the lack of pocket awareness. And this is where I had a lot of issues with some other people. Oh, high football intelligence. Yeah, on a lot of the throws, you saw high football intelligence. On a lot of the sacks, you didn't see high football intelligence. Throw the ball away. Just throw it away. Throw it away. Getting sacked, taken out of field goal range. Getting sacked, and all of a sudden now it's 4th and 30. Those things will never, and I mean never, fly in the NFL. 100% completely unacceptable. Things he certainly has to improve upon. How does he handle being out from under the Sanders umbrella? I mean, it could work both ways, obviously. It could work not so favorable for him, but it could also have him find a whole nother level of himself that didn't know was there. And I think that's going to be one of the more fascinating things in seeing Shedeur. Only been in town about 24 hours. And I know we live in a social media world, but I think the more he puts out, and we get this from Watson too, nobody wants to see it. And I'm not comparing the two, but I think if Sanders just went about his business, not have to put everything through a social media lens, he goes to a high school today, talks to some high school students. You see, there's traits there that would probably have a lot of this fan base in the city ready to love him. I don't know if the legendary tweet all day long, once a day, whatever, are anything that anybody truly loves. And I've gotten some feedback that there are some people within the NFL that did not like that at all. Um, if you have a nice watch, kid, that's fine. Nobody needs to know about it. Put it in your little lockbox in your locker when you get to the facility. But you see that there's traits there that this fan base could absolutely fall in love with as far as the person he is. And that's going to be a big thing of it. How does he handle himself? Being away and being out of the Sanders nest and just getting to be Shedeur for essentially the first time in his life. But if you ask me who starts week 1 for the Cleveland Browns under center, Joe Flacco. You ask me who starts the most games at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, I will say Shedeur Sanders. A lot of quarterback talk here today. We mentioned the wide receiver movement, Diontae Johnson in. Elijah Moore, I would say it trends towards him coming back, where there is now a floor salary number for him to return to Cleveland. So just all things to watch as we continue here over the days and weeks as we get closer and closer, of course, to rookie meeting camp next week, OTAs, and eventually late July training camp. Again, big thanks to the folks over at State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. They have been outstanding with us for over the last 4 months. We truly, truly appreciate the sponsorship. Browns 3D on the OBR Streaming Network has been brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate you all for coming out every day to read the written content. We appreciate you all coming out every night for the OBR Streaming Network. Make sure you're subscribed to the OBR on YouTube, subscribe to the OBR on Twitch. Stick around, 7 o'clock. You got Barry McBride. And of course, you have Fred Greetham. Give the guys a listen. Big thank you to you all. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR. And we will talk to you all tomorrow.